All right, so we're diving into global trade today. 2025 just started, and President Trump's already making some big moves.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, right?
Yeah, and we've got this article from Freight Waves, and, they're all about the logistics and freight industries, so
Yeah, their perspective is really valuable on this.
totally. And get this, we're talking tariffs. We've got economists making some pretty intense predictions,
Yeah.
and the EU is looking like they might push back.
Yeah, it's shaping up to be a pretty big,
A pretty big year.
yeah, pretty big year for trade.
Yeah, definitely. So first up, let's talk tariffs.
Okay, tariffs.
Trump announces these tariffs, right? Up to 25% on imports from Canada and Mexico.
Huge.
Huge. Like, if you're importing anything from those countries,
Yeah, that's a major,
it's a big deal.
it is a big deal.
So officially, what's the word? Why are these tariffs happening?
Well, officially it's all about immigration and trade imbalances. And Trump's framing it as a way to protect American workers,
Hmm.
address what he sees as unfair trade practices from those countries.
Okay, but here's where it gets a little murky.
Yeah,
So he announces these tariffs, everyone's freaking out, markets are going crazy,
right. Everyone's panicking.
and then they're delayed.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Yeah, that delay, it's definitely a signal, It could be a shift in strategy.
Right.
I mean, some analysts, Goldman Sachs, they're calling Trump's initial comments on trade more benign than expected.
More benign than expected. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe these tariffs are more like a bargaining chip, Just a way to pressure Canada and Mexico.
So less about actually using them and more about just holding them over their heads.
Possibly, yeah. It's a high-stakes game for
Oh,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then you've got Stephen Marin, who's Trump's pick for the Council of Economic Advisors.
Oh, yeah, Marin.
He's got this whole theory about currency offset, which basically says that these tariffs could actually weaken the Canadian and Mexican currencies.
Right, right.
I mean, how does that even work?
It's an interesting idea, right? So Marin's argument is that because tariffs would make Canadian and Mexican goods more expensive here,
Yeah.
demand for those goods could drop,
Okay.
which would then lead to less demand for their currencies.
Uh-huh.
And that could make their currencies depreciate in value.
So you're saying that by making those goods more expensive, we could actually end up making them cheaper.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
If their currencies weaken enough, it could offset some of the price increase from the tariffs.
Okay, now that is wild.
It's a bold claim for sure.
Yeah, it is. But while all this is going on with, these potential trade wars and all that,
Yeah.
economists are starting to get a little nervous.
Can you blame them?
No, not at all. I mean, the Wall Street Journal did this poll of economists, and their prediction is that we're going to see a 2.7% jump in inflation by December of 2025.
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
It's a big jump.
Hmm.
So explain this to me like I'm five. How do tariffs actually lead to inflation?
Okay, well, tariffs make imported goods more expensive, right? And that increased cost can have this ripple effect across the entire economy.
Oh, okay.
Like local production gets more expensive because a lot of businesses rely on those imported materials.
Right. They need those imports.
Exactly. And then, of course, consumers end up paying more for pretty much everything.
Oof. Yeah, I see that.
And then to top it off, the Federal Reserve might have to raise interest rates to try to keep things under control.
Okay, so it's like a whole chain reaction.
Exactly. It's a domino effect.
So are there any industries that would be hit harder than others by all this?
Oh, absolutely. The article specifically mentioned construction and automotive manufacturing.
Okay, yeah, those make sense.
Yeah, they rely heavily on imported materials,
Yeah.
Steel, aluminum, all the components that go into building a house or a car.
Right.
So if those costs go up, well, the final price for consumers is going to be a lot higher.
Okay, so for anyone listening who's thinking about buying a house or a car in the next few years, you might want to factor in the possibility of those things costing a lot more.
Yeah, definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and it's not just about houses and cars, right? If everything starts costing more, people are going to be more careful with their money,
Of course.
which could then slow down the whole U.S. economy.
It's all connected.
And then on top of all that, we've got the European Union, who are not exactly thrilled about these potential tariffs.
Yeah, they're not happy.
I mean, they're our biggest trading partner, so...
They have a lot at stake.
Right, so these tariffs could really hurt their economy.
Definitely.
So they're not just going to take it lying down.
Oh, no, they're already making moves.
What are they doing?
Well, they're looking at a few options. Retaliatory tariffs are definitely on the table.
Okay, so they might hit back with their own tariffs.
It's possible, yeah. And they're also looking at strengthening their trade relationships with other parts of the world. You know they've done it before.
Oh, right. They hit back when we had those steel and aluminum tariffs a few years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And they didn't hold back either.
Yeah, so they'll probably do the same thing now.
Most likely, yeah.
And knowing them, they'll be strategic about it.
Oh, absolutely. They'll target those products that are made in states that are important to Trump politically.
Ouch. Yeah. So they can really make it hurt.
Exactly.
So this is basically how trade wars start, right?
It's definitely a step in that direction, yeah.
And nobody really wins in a trade war.
No, not really. Everyone ends up paying more in the end.
Yeah, and it can mess up global markets and even hurt those relationships between countries.
Yeah, it can cause a lot of damage for sure.
Okay, so retaliation is risky, but what else can they do? I mean, is there any way to calm things down before it turns into a full-blown trade war?
Well, the EU is also trying to team up with other countries for trade, not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Yeah, like that deal they just made with Mexico.
Exactly.
Mexico drops those tariffs on European wine, and the EU gets to invest more in Mexico.
Seems like a good deal for everyone.
Yeah, definitely.
But it also kind of shows that the EU is serious about not being so dependent on us for trade. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like they're saying, hey, we have other options.
Exactly.
So if we're going to play hardball, they're going to find other people to play with.
That's what it looks like.
Wow, so this could really change things up globally in the long run.
It could. Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on.
Okay, so let's recap here for everyone listening.
Sure, right.
We've got tariffs being used as like a negotiating tactic.
Right.
We've got inflation worries.
Yeah.
And we've got the EU getting ready to fight back.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. It's like a really complicated situation.
Definitely. There are so many factors at play.
Yeah, and it's hard to know what's going to happen next.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as I was reading through this article, something kind of jumped out at me.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about how those tariffs could cause inflation, right?
Right.
But the article also mentioned that the Canadian and Mexican currencies actually went down when all this tariff talk started.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Investors got nervous and pulled back.
Exactly. So if their currencies are weaker, wouldn't that make those imports from Canada and Mexico cheaper?
That's a good point.
Right. It seems like that could cancel out the impact of the tariffs, at least a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. It goes back to that currency offset idea that Murren was talking about.
Right.
If their currencies drop enough, it could balance out those price increases from the tariffs.
So maybe all this talk about an inflation explosion is a little premature.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. But it's hard to say for sure,
Yeah.
It's so complicated, those tariffs, the currencies going up and down, how the markets react. It's all connected.
Okay, so you're basically just along for the ride at this point.
Pretty much, but that's what makes it so interesting, right?
Yeah. Definitely keeps things exciting.
It definitely does. And that's why it's so important to stay informed and be ready for anything.
Totally. All right, so we've learned a lot about global trade today.
We have.
We talked about how Trump's using tariffs as a bargaining chip. We talked about those inflation worries and how the EU is stepping up to protect themselves.
Yeah, we covered a lot.
But as we were going through this article, something else hit me.
Oh, what's that?
We focused a lot on the big picture. How these tariffs could affect prices overall.
Right.
But what about specific industries?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like if those imported steel prices go up,
Yeah.
what happens to the construction industry? Will it be more expensive to build a house? And what will that mean for, regular people who just want to buy a home?
That's a really important question. And it shows how interconnected all these things really are,
Yeah, for sure.
What happens over the next few months could have these, ripple effects for years down the line.
So we're basically living through a historical moment right now.
We are. And it's going to be fascinating and crucial to watch how everything plays out.
Right, well, I think that's a great place to wrap things up. This deep dive has been a whirlwind of information. And honestly, we've just scratched the surface of this whole global trade situation.
It's a huge topic.
But hopefully you listening out there have a better idea what's going on.
I hope so.
It's complicated, but we tried to break it down for you.
We did our best.
And as this story keeps developing, we'll be here to help you make sense of it all. Feels like we're in the middle of some kind of, trade thriller. We don't even know how it's going to end.
Right. What's the next chapter going to be?
Exactly. Global trade, it's all connected, right? So what happens over there?
Oh, yeah. It has a ripple effect,
It
definitely.
affects everyone.
For sure. It's what makes it so interesting.
And kind of scary, too, right?
Oh, yeah. A little bit. Yeah.
So before we wrap this whole thing up,
Okay.
what's the one thing you really want our listener to walk away with today?
I think the big thing is that this is all new territory.
Yeah.
Trump's approach to trade, it's not like anything we've seen before.
Right. It's definitely different.
Yeah, and it's creating a lot of, uncertainty in the global market. So
Yeah.
how everyone else reacts, like the EU, it's going to be super important.
Huge.
Yeah.
Like the whole global trade landscape, it could be totally different in a few years.
Wow, yeah.
It's a big deal.
So basically what you're saying is
yeah.
if you hear about tariffs or trade wars, on the news or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
remember that it's not just, numbers on a page.
Right.
It can actually affect you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It could change how much things cost. It could even affect your job.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And even like what you see at the store, what you can buy.
Wow. Yeah.
It's all connected.
Okay, so we've covered a lot today,
A lot.
but there's always more to talk about, right?
Oh, always.
So to everyone listening out there,
Yeah.
thanks for joining us on this wild ride through global trade.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
It's complex,
Yeah.
but hopefully we help you understand it a little better.
I hope so, too.
And as this whole thing keeps unfolding, we'll be here to break it all down for you.
Absolutely. Stay tuned.
We'll see you next time.